Hello, this is Erin with the Joy in Pens and Paper, and it is time for a 3 Inks Thursday video. In this video, I will be taking 3 inks, swatching it on 3 different pieces of paper, and using 3 different nib sizes to write so that we can all see and learn together the differences or the things that this ink shows us. Because I am getting towards the back of the book, and partly why I may have sounded like I was giggling at the start of this video, I will be using the bear from Hobonichi a few years ago just to weigh this page down a little bit. We'll see. I might change my mind on that. So for this video, we do have Bank Paper Cosmo Air Light from Galen Leather Co. and Tomoe River. I made sure to put my fingers right down on these pages as I set them up, so fingerprints might actually come through. We shall see, leaning really far into that because I tend to often apologize for having fingerprints. For the tools, I have a Kakimori brass nib dip pen that I will be using to do the swatch on each of the papers, and I have 3 TWSBI Go pens with a fine, a medium, and a stub nib. And additionally, I have a white t-shirt to rest my tools on after I rinse them to soak up any additional water, and I have a glass of water. And then for some of the inks, I have samples, so I'm going to be using my Inkapet to hold my samples. Now, the 3 inks that we will be swatching today, one of them is likely not a fit, but it was close enough that I thought, you know what, I'm going to put it as a third because I think it's a darker version of both of the other 2. So my outlier is Monteverde Pumpkin Cake. This is a sample from a viewer. So that will be the first one that gets swatched. The second is also Monteverde Copper Noir. This is a sample from an ink swap with Zen of the Pen. I believe that video just posted. And then lastly is Diamine, oh, sorry for that glare. There we go. Vintage Copper. This is from the 2021 Inkvent calendar, and it is a shimmer ink. Oh, I'm trying to get that. There we go. Get the text for you. So there's the beautiful shimmer at the bottom. I will be swatching the shimmer ink last just so that I don't contaminate the water and thus my tools. So apologies on that. Okay, so let's get into this 3 inks Thursday. I cannot believe that this is number 27. And I am so proud that I have been doing this consistently. And it's really lovely to flip back through my book and see all the different 3 inks. All right, so first off, we have this really lovely, I'm going to be skewed by one of the other inks, but I want to say coppery color. It's a reddish, orangish, little bit of brown leaning color. It is beautiful. This is one I have inked up in a pen. It was really well behaved in a pen in terms of lubrication. And I think this is true for some inks in the red family, but it did get just a little gunky on the nib as time went on. But just a quick wipe with a paper towel fixed that. All right, let me put some more fingerprints on there. So with the fine nib, I will write the brand name. Now, are you somebody that likes the sound of the paper crinkling when you watch these videos. I believe for some people it probably constitutes as a form of ASMR or calming. It doesn't for me. So that's where I try to set things up so that they don't crinkle. Definitely spelled pumpkin wrong. Pumpkin cake. I will definitely be finishing this book within this calendar year. And for next year, I will be using a Hobonichi notebook. All right, so, and then with the stub nib, I'm just going to do some letters. Yes, that is a really lovely color. Now, if I were to do this in the order that I think is best to highlight the selection of these three inks, I would next be swatching the Diamine Vintage Copper. However, because it has shimmer, I will not be doing that. Okay, so now we have Monteverde Copper Noir. Such a lovely name. Okay, I was, if I'm being honest, expecting, oh, there's all those fingerprints. I was expecting a much more drastic difference. I tend to say this in most of my 3-ink videos, not all, but I select my inks based on how they look within the Wearingeul swatch book, which is a different kind of paper. I'm actually not sure what kind of paper is in this book. So that is a fourth variable, and I'm picking inks that look similar on that paper. So they may not always look the same on these papers. So on the Wearingeul swatch book, this was leaning much more red, which made me question whether or not it was the right fit, but I love, love, love that color. Okay, be a little bit more careful in my finger placement. So this is another Monteverde. And this is the very lovely name of Copper Noir. And next, the stub nib. My voice seemed to go out just a little bit there. I'm going to dip that one more time because that does not seem interesting. I also am the first to acknowledge I do not have practice with a stub nib. I seem to be stub nib challenged. Something I'm going to work on at some point. I think because I critique how I use a stub nib, I'm not very inclined to ink it up and actually take the time to practice. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. Now, this is a shimmer ink. I am going to agitate it initially and then I will do the swatches, but it is likely that when I get to the writing sample portion, the shimmer will have started to settle towards the bottom. So the writing sample may not be as shimmery as it would be if this were inked up in a pen. Ooh, okay. In my opinion, these three inks are really good sampling together. Now you may not notice, but as I swatch with the Kakimari nib, I slightly turn it so that I can kind of pull ink down fairly evenly. All right, and starting with the fine nib, there's still some moisture in there. There we go. And diamine. And I'll write Inkvent just to have an opportunity to do more writing. I actually really like this color. I've seen it used by other fountain pen users in their Curly Inked or in, well, whatever other videos that they're posting. And I really like it, but I don't know, I can go back and check. I don't know that I've ever inked it up. And that's just a mistake. In this particular year of Inkvent, in my opinion, there were a lot of really, really good inks. One of which is a beautiful kind of caramelly brown called Brandy Snap. And I did end up getting a full bottle of that. So I'm a little worried that if I ink this up and I love it, I'm going to end up with another full bottle. And those bottles are not small. There we go. Okay. So Ancient Copper just has a little bit more drying to do. Let me move that bare and let's get looking. So I'm already fairly zoomed in. So starting at the top, I think this does end up being a nice flow of inks. It's not as different as I initially thought. In the Wearingeul swatch book, let me clarify. So the Monteverde pumpkin cake is this really beautiful reddish chestnut brown, in my opinion. All of these are my opinion. Your eyes may tell you a very different story. That is the beauty of fountain pen inks and this hobby. But looking at the three different papers, you've got the bank paper, and I am actually just pausing for a moment. I just want to make sure that is in fact, okay, that is in fact the bank paper. All right. Oh, yes, sorry, my brain wandered in an off direction for a moment. So on the bank paper, you've got this kind of a flatter color comparatively to Cosmo Airlight and Tomoe River paper, but it's this really nice, like I said, flat color. You see a little bit of the lighter tones here at the end, but you're not really getting heavy shading on the bank paper. Then you move over to the Cosmo Airlight and you start getting a much more complex story here. And you've got a little bit of this really dark, almost black brown outlining of the area that really pooled, which is just lovely. And the Tomoe River for me takes the cake, pun intended. You've got the shading, you've got the really dark outline around the swatch, where it pools, it gets a little bit into that redness. And it's just really a really nice color. Looking at the written text here, you can even see some of the shading, specifically in the medium and the stub nib. In the fine nib, it's a little bit of almost pops of brightness at the tops of letters, which would make sense because the bottom is where the ink is going to pool, and usually your strokes are ending towards the bottom of a letter, but um, the so that would be a more saturated or darker area. Now the Monteverde Copper Noir, another really lovely ink. It is perhaps a shade lighter than the pumpkin cake, but it's a very similar base color. So it's that uh, kind of a chestnut brown. There's a bit more of kind of a pinky oranginess going on. On the bank paper, you see some of the streaks from the strokes of the Kakimori nib here. And I really love that this corner here is darker. Likely that's where ink pooled right before or right as I picked up my tool. There is a little bit of drying still happening here on the Cosmo Air Light, but goodness, look at that ink. While I love having the fingerprints and it's funny and it makes me smile, because of how lovely that swatch is on the Cosmo Air Light, I really wish it wasn't interrupted. Having said that, you get to see around it. This kind of, I don't know, it reminds me a little bit of like Mars or some other planet in just, or maybe even a desert. It's so rusty, so rusty. And then the Tomoe River, it's a lot more flat as compared to Cosmo Air Light. And even, I'm going to go back to the Cosmo Air Light. This is almost gritty down here. Just the way, how do I describe it? I wonder if I can pull it up closer. Oh, yes, I think you can see it right there. It's like, it feels to me like this looks like sand that you could actually touch. It's awesome. I love it. I love it so much. Continuing the Tomoe River paper. You do get some shading. You've got this area right here. It's a little bit more saturated, and even right here in this little tiny area, it's got this darkness to it that's a little similar to this section right here, just a teensy tiny bit. In the text, in the writing, you can absolutely see that shading definitely in the stub nib, but the stub was a little drier on this ink, and I don't know if that was a user issue or if this ink tends to run a little bit drier. I will have to put it in a pen to learn a little bit more about that. And in the medium, I think the medium nib is probably the nib that really highlights it the most. I think I need to get more mediums in my collection. That's a rough thing for me to say. And then lastly, the Diamine Inkvent Vintage Copper. Such a beautiful ink. I think it's very similar in the base color to Monteverde Copper Noir. So similarly, I would say it's a shade a shade lighter than Monteverde Pumpkin Cake. Starting at the bank paper, again, you've got that kind of flatness in the color. You're not really seeing a lot of shading, but you are seeing the shimmer. Hopefully you're able to see that too. There it is. Look at that. And then the Cosmo Air Light, you are seeing like the base color looks a little bit more, I'm going to say orangey, and it's a little subdued compared to the bank paper. And then you've got this really lovely area here where the ink pooled, where you get some really nice character coming out. Now the shimmer is there, it is definitely more prevalent down here at the bottom, but it's generally pretty well distributed. And then lastly, the Tomoe River paper, similar kind of shading in the pooling area as Cosmo Air Light. It's a similar color as the bank paper. And again, the shimmer is pretty well distributed. So the areas where it appears a little heavier are not surprising. It's the area that it pooled, and then where I must have lifted the Kakimori nib just a little bit, which is where you see that white area, around that, it's a little bit more saturated. Now in the writing, you're seeing just a little bit of some shading. You get a little bit more shimmer with the fine nib. But if you're thinking about just the logic of the shimmer has to fall and it falls at a specific rate, the shimmer is going to be present more the sooner that the pen went into the ink. So that makes sense to me. And you're getting a little bit of some shading in the lettering here on the C with the stub nib and on the G with the stub nib. Not a whole lot in the medium nib, and what is looking a little bit like shading to me with the fine is actually just the shimmer is making it a little bit lighter. So here it is. Here's our 3 inks Thursday number 27 with these really beautiful, kind of a chestnutty copper brown color. It's beautiful. I love it. All right. Thank you if you made it to the end. I greatly appreciate it. If you are not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I am going to primarily be posting about fountain pens and fountain pen inks and occasionally paper, as you see here, but I may introduce some new papers from time to time. So hopefully I will catch you in my next one. Bye.